everybody, and welcome to our Q&A on people seeking asylum. Our first question comes from Oliver in Wan Ponds. Is it illegal to seek asylum by boat? And over to Fran for the answer to this question.
Thanks, Linda. It's good to be here. It is legal to seek asylum by boat or by whatever means, even though we may hear the government say that it is illegal. Because actually Article 31 of the Refugee Convention, which we have signed, Australia has signed, states the refugees shouldn't be penalised for arriving in emergency because they've been unable to obtain travel documentation. They may be fleeing in a situation of crisis, and it may not be safe to seek visas from the government because they may in fact be persecuted by the government. So they may not have the road or the way to seek the proper travel documents. So they can seek asylum by whatever means and arrive in a country by any means because they're facing persecution. That's what a person seeking asylum is. A refugee is granted refugee status when they have proof that they've fled and sought asylum. So it is wrong to say it's illegal to seek asylum, and it's a language that we can counteract because seeking safety is a human right. It's like a speeding ambulance. It generally might be illegal to speed on the road, but in the case of saving a life, it is permitted. So when people are fleeing for their lives, it is permitted to arrive in a country without documentation by boat or by plane or by any other means because they're seeking safety and a place for asylum and a safe future.
That analogy about the speeding ambulance going through a red light, that's actually on the government website, on the Parliament House website. So it's quite interesting that sometimes our politicians like to use the word illegal, but their own Parliament website says that it's not. It's quite interesting.
That's right. Yeah, thanks.
Did anyone else have anything to add on that, or will we move on to the next one?
Well, the only other point to add to that, Linda, is a lot of people think that there's a perception out there that you're in a country and you can just make an application to become a refugee by popping into your nearest post office. It's impossible in many countries around the world. You can't even seek asylum in your own country. You actually have to leave. There's nowhere to go. You can't pop into an embassy or a post office. The UNHCR doesn't have a camp there. They don't have an office in many of these countries. And you actually have to leave those countries without paperwork, without anything, and keep going to the next countries until you can find a place where you can speak to someone who's an official who has their government has signed up to the International Refugee Convention, and then you can say, I would like to seek asylum. But until you can do that, then you're in a desperate situation.
It's a very good point. Yeah. So our next question comes from Raj in Belmont. And Raj wants to know, are people who come by boat genuine refugees? And Tim, back to you to answer this one.
Good. Thanks for that question, Raj. Yes, they are. The government's own statistics over the years have found 90% of people that have come by boat to be and granted refugee status. So they've been found to be refugees. They've been granted refugee status, and then unfortunately not treated the same as other people who have been granted refugee status through UNHCR or who have flown here by plane. So our government actually discriminates, deliberately discriminates, despite the fact that they nearly all the people coming to Australia by boat have ended up with refugee status issued by the UNHCR, and it stands to reason. I mean, the travel a long way through dangerous, often dangerous waters and dangerous countries, just to get anywhere near a country like Australia, is at great risk, and you would have to be, in your own mind, at greater risk in those countries, and it's usually because of war and the dominating regime persecuting minority groups. But there's also individuals who get offside with the local warlord, or they might be gay, or in the cases of Iran, they may be supporting democratic elections, and or they may be women who would like to get educated and find themselves on the wrong side of the regime. And when I say on the wrong side of a government or a warlord, that means death. That means torture, persecution, permanent jail, and death. It's not like you lose your rights to go on a Sunday picnic. These are very desperate and dangerous situations, and of course, people will do what they can for their children and their partners, etc., to escape that situation. And when once the story is known, and they finally get to an official who's responsible for administering the human rights, international human rights obligations, then they are nearly always found to be a refugee and granted that status. Yes.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else want to add anything to that? No. I heard one particular refugee say that when he got on the boat, he had no idea where he was going, and that didn't matter. What mattered was that it was leaving the country that was persecuting him. That it was the sea was much safer than the land, so he had to go. Kind of always remembered that one. So our next question, if we want to move on, comes from Mike in Leopold. And Mike's asked, why are people seeking asylum usually young men, and where are their families? And Kathy, you're going to take this one. Yep.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Mike. That's a question that many people ask. I've spoken to a lot of young men who made the journey alone to seek refuge in a safe country. Some of them were teenagers when they fled, and others were men who had wives and children. They had to leave their homes to avoid being imprisoned, tortured or killed. They lived with persecution because of their race, ethnicity, or their religious or political beliefs. Because, as we know, brutal regimes target young men in particular, as they are seen as the future of that particular group. And remember too, Mike, that in countries they're fleeing, there is no queue, as Tim mentioned and explained so well. There's no foreign embassy to apply for a visa, and they've got to pay to use agents to get them across borders through other hostile countries and across the seas. It's a very costly, dangerous, and physically very challenging undertaking. Those who make these journeys need to be strong and able to endure many risks. A young man I spoke to today explained to me that you have to hide, you have to get across mountains, you have to hide in the back of a truck for days, you don't know where you're going. And for women and children, that's a very, very terrifying and challenging ordeal. So it's the young men who have the physical ability to be able to do this. And remember too, as has been mentioned, most of them don't even know where they're going to end up, but their hope is when they do reach a safe country, they'll be able to apply for family reunion visas to bring their immediate families to follow in a safe way. But none of them realise that, having made that risky journey here and survived, that nearly 10 years later, and having been recognised by this government as refugees, that they would still be waiting for permanent protection visas and the chance to apply for family reunion. Thank you.
It's an incredibly long time. People just, getting somewhere to be safe and thinking that they'll be able to send safely, like you said, send for their family to come safely with them. It's completely heartbreaking to be separated for that long.
and it is not easy to running with your family, because you more likely caught with um, with others who are searching for you, or you want to hide it from them. It's not easy to run as a family, because even though I'm a refugee, so when I want to leave my country, it wasn't easy. So have to hide and month stay with other people's house, or every time someone come to churching, you have to hide, and you never know that movement where they're going to catch you or not. So if you with your children or family, you more likely surrender than running for safety. So that's one of the reason people running alone. Even they sometimes start their journey with family, then they separate on the way. Many of Tamil refugees, like they separated from their mom and loved one. One end up in other countries, and others end up in a different countries. And it is another thing. Lots of people think only the problem for young people. No, it's not true. There's older people have a problem too. But the thing is, young people come forward and stand against whatever happened for them. Like they want to face the challenge. Then they've been more targeted than older people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Thanks for that, Nidhi. That's really helpful information. Yeah, I heard of an older Afghani woman the other day saying that she won't leave her village. This is my village. I grew up here. I've always lived here. If the Taliban want to kill me, they can do it here, not on the way to running away. So there is that as well with some of the older people as well. Like Nidhi said, it's the younger people who are more likely to take that chance and to try to get to safety. Good point. The next question, and we're back to you, Nidhi, for this one. This one's from Mel in Hamlin Heights, and Mel wants to know, do people seeking asylum integrate into Australian life and contribute to our communities?
Thank you for your question, and good to be with you guys. And my name is Nidhi, and I'm a Tamil refugee from Sri Lanka. I came by boat in 2012 from Sri Lanka to Australia, and I have been living in the Geelong region for the last 8.5 years. When I arrived to Geelong, I don't have any of Australian people I knew, or I didn't have much English knowledge. So I decided to go to community center to learn English and also participate in community activities, so I can connect with local people. And when I granted the work rights, I started full-time work in a shop. And back in Sri Lanka, I had interest in community welfare work. So I decided to study further and improve my knowledge so that I can continue my work here in Australia. And then I have completed diploma in community service. Now I'm also working in the community service sector as a support carer, supporting vulnerable people, like people with disabilities and aging or vulnerable people. And so, and also I have initiated a social food project here in Queenscliff to provide, share my culture and also sharing our experience. So those Australians can come and experience and also understand the real situation for people seeking refugees. I know many of my Tamil refugees here, they have started their own business, like carpenter, timber flooring, landscaping. Some of them are working and studying, and some of them are doing volunteer work. But because we are people who came by boat, refugees who came by boat, and our contribution to Australia have been acknowledged for political purpose. And we have been used for political purpose, and we haven't recognized as a human beings. Even I have been found to be a refugee, and I have been contributing a lot in Australian community in a safer way, but
and tax.
but we haven't acknowledged. Hopefully, the government, the people who are working and for better change for everyone in the coming years. I hope so. But thank you for your question.
I think, Nidhi, you're a great example of, you know, an ordinary, everyday person who just needed to get to safety, and you've got a lot to contribute to our communities, and you are, which is fantastic.
Thank you. And without the community support, I don't think I can do this, because I remember when I arrived in Geelong, like, I don't know where to go to ask help, because it's a new country, new language, new culture. But yeah, the people in Geelong are very supportive. Without you guys, I don't think I can stand here and speak. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think we're really lucky to have you and you know, the Tamil community in Geelong and the other refugees and people seeking asylum who really make up our, you know, they're part of the very rich tapestry of Geelong. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
So anything else to add on that one, or we move on to the next one? Happy to move on.
I was just going to quickly say that when we can see all that Nidhi contributes to our community, it makes sense that the government would grant you a permanent visa. That's what we want, that you are permanently able to stay here and contribute to our country and stay safe. That's why we do our work at CRAG, because we know the value of having people in our community who bring so much. So we really will keep fighting to change those laws to make permanent protection a reality for you. But yeah, we love having you in our community, Nidhi.
Thank you.
For your contribution. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So our next question comes from Shaya in Norlane, and Shaya has asked, why don't people stay in Indonesia, Malaysia or Thailand? And they're kind of the transit countries on the way to Australia. And Samil, you're going to answer this one.
Thanks, Shaya. So these countries are not UN signatory convention countries. They do not accept refugees for permanent resettlement. Therefore, a lot of the time, these refugees are at massive risk of being jailed or deported back to persecution if they don't have visas on them. And then also, they don't have access to healthcare or education for their children, or rights access to either of these things, and therefore they don't have the means to support themselves or their families long term.
Yeah, so I've heard people say that, you know, they arrive there with a certain amount of money to support themselves, thinking that they would register with the UNHCR and wait until they were accepted for resettlement somewhere, and then the UNHCR tells them that it's at least a 20-year wait. And even then, you know, Australia is not currently taking any refugees out of Indonesia. And then people are wondering how they're going to survive for that time with no work rights, and they can't support themselves. So it's a choice between starving to death, you know, or, you know, can't educate your kids, can't provide for them at all if you have children with you or your families. Yeah. And trying to get somewhere safe makes a lot of sense. Anyone else got anything to add?
If I may, just on people either en route to a destination unknown, or even when they finally arrive here in Australia, our government, and other governments do this as well, but our government leaves people often without work rights, often without a Medicare card, and in some cases even without any funding or social services whatsoever. And that's a really appalling thing to do to somebody, because it leaves them at their most vulnerable for exploitation. And I've had many instances here in Geelong where I've had to help people out with industrial law, where they think they're being employed to do a job, and only find out that they're being super exploited, sometimes injured, can't get compensation, can't get medical support, often only earning a couple of dollars an hour. And that exploitation is already rife in the community. Even people on student visas can suffer this as well. But refugees, people who have been given a refugee status, yet not a permanent residency or certain rights, that they are open to super exploitation. And in many countries, even in the great United States, there's some 8 million people who don't have rights, yet they're all working very hard because bosses exploit them. And this happens throughout Asia. If people can get people who don't have rights, then they're preyed upon. They're preyed upon, and unfortunately, people that are desperate have got no option. If you've got no source of income and you've got no backup and you've got no rights, what are you to do? Starve to death.
And then people in Indonesia who are caught working are deported back to their countries. That's happened, you know, to lots of people. So there's that fear as well. Yeah. So our last question, will we move on to our last one? So this one's from Maria in Bell Park. And Maria wants to know, how do we know if they are who they say they are? It's part of the refugee determination process. People are required to establish their identity. It's a really important thing. We know that people don't usually have passports. That's why they've actually come by boat, because they haven't been able to use their passports and go through the regular means of just going through the, you know, applying for a visa, turning up to the airport with your passport and you know, arriving here in Australia. So they have to use other channels because they don't have that passport. However, the idea that they don't have any ID at all is actually a bit of a myth. Most people have some form of ID of some description. So it could be, you know, something that they've been issued within their home country. Could be something like a national identity card. It could be driver's license, school records, I guess medical records, anything that kind of has their name and establishes who they are, information about them, photos, signatures, those things. So people either bring that ID with them, or if it's too dangerous to carry anything with them because you're trying to pretend to be someone else in order to get out of the country safely, they're usually able to send for it. Family members will send it later, so that then they can provide it to the government here in Australia when they get here. And occasionally people have nothing at all, and that might be due to being completely stateless and no one's actually ever issued you with anything because you're considered a non-citizen, you don't belong. So like Rohingya people or stateless Thali Kurds in around Iran and Iraq might not have anything. It could also be because you've been sheltering in a country for a very long time where you have no status. So your family might have fled, you might be sheltering in that country, you've grown up there, but then it becomes unsafe for you there as well. So then you have to flee and you didn't have anything to begin with. Or it might be, you might not have anything because your ID's been confiscated as part of the persecution process. But in those cases, the government uses biometric data. So fingerprints, eye scans, signatures, all sorts of things that they use to determine someone's identity. They search through national records and international records. And they also use very extensive questioning so that you actually have to be able to demonstrate that you are that person from that particular village or that particular city. And they ask all sorts of questions about, you know, how long would it take you to walk from here to there, and which school did you go to, which shop did you go to, where did you go fishing, those kind of things, so that only people with really local knowledge would know without preparation time in an interview. I'm sure, Niti, you will probably ask some of those kind of questions. So it's very extensive work goes into establishing who people are. It's a bit of a false idea that people are coming and we don't know who they are and we have no way of doing any security checks on them. I think that probably people who come by boat are probably the most security checked people on the face of the earth. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
Yeah, look.
Go for it, Niti.
Personally, I don't have a passport. I was a 22-year-old when I was in Sri Lanka. I was a university student, but I didn't even apply. I don't know how to, and I was very dangerous to go to that area to apply and get passport. I don't have a plan to leave my country at the time. I had a plan to have a future there, but things changed opposite to my plan, and I had to leave. And there's the only option that at the time to leave the country. Today, I'm living with lots of pain and you know, suffering here, but still I'm living, and my family are happy that I'm living. One day I will reunited. Another thing, I provide lots of other document, different ID card, which is provided by universities and school, and you know, also the document. Then again, my name is so long, like Nityan and then Kanagaratne. Even if I say to Australian people, they will laugh. I always say Niti. Even back in my country, they always say Niti. But if someone wanted to write it down or read it, it's pretty hard. When the translator write into English, they sometimes put double THI, sometimes put one THI. But then when the immigration officers want to look, they look every single letters, because they don't have much knowledge about our particular Tamil language. So and a lot of people at the interview, they couldn't explain this sort of thing, and we didn't get much time to explain. And so on the end, the immigration come to the conclusion, decided this is a false ID or this is not really good. But I'm a Sri Lankan Tamil, but no one can change that. You know what I mean? So lots of people try to do, you know, give much information as possible. And another thing, during the wartime, we've been moving different houses. Our house been burned and, you know, taken by the military. And who care about the piece of document to take every time when we're running for life, to save our life, you know? And 2004, Sri Lanka has a tsunami came, and lots of Tamil people on that east coast, their house been damaged by the tsunami as well. You know, a lot of Tamil people lost their identity. And when we came to Australia, we can't get all the information. Sometimes we have to go in person to get the document. If I send my mom or others, they won't provide all the documents. But many Tamil people here, they try to do, you know, positive thing for the Australian government to prove they are genuine people.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, like you said, a lot of reasons why people, you know, if they have to flee in a hurry, don't necessarily have everything with them, but usually someone can get, mostly someone can get something, like you said, a university card, something like that to establish who you are. But in some cases, yeah, it's just not possible. But yeah, there's a lot of other ways that the government can establish who people are and can still do the security checks. Yeah. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Does anyone want to add anything else before we finish up?
I just want to say to people who are listening and to humans in Geelong, that if you are interested in the work that we do, Combined Refugee Action Group, you can always jump on our website or Facebook to have a look, because when we think about it, it's people like us who are just speaking up that these policies are not okay, for the people that we know in our community, and we want them changed. So we can always do whatever we are able to do in small amounts to pay attention to these issues affecting people like Nitty and us as well, that we don't want to see what is happening to many people who come seeking safety. So we can do something about it. So if you're interested, we've got a Facebook page and a website, the Combined Refugee Action Group.
Our website is the W's, CRAG Geelong, so CRAG Geelong.com. And our email, if you want to email us, is combinedrefugeeactiongroup, all one word, @gmail.com. And then, or else look us up on Facebook, like Fran said. Well, thanks everyone for your time, and thanks everyone for sending in your questions. Hopefully we'll see you all in person at the in-person Humans in Geelong event, which is scheduled for December. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.